In general, in research, there's a distinction that you can make in how VR, but for that matter, also AR and MR are being used in a research study. It can be used as an object, but also as an application or a method. When you're using VR as an object in the social sciences, then you're really studying VR itself. What's the VR system like? How do people experience VR, for instance, compared to a real world experience? So really virtual reality is your object of study. You study VR itself. This is different from cases where VR is being used as an application. Again, VR is being used in a research study, but you really use it to train people, to change their behavior in the real world. People have a certain experience in VR in a digital virtual environment. And you sort of hope that their experience in VR generalizes to the real world. So you can train them, you can practice things with them. It's also related, for instance, to phobia. You can treat people for certain things, with always in the back of your mind that you're doing this to change something in the real world. And finally, VR can be used as a method. This is often the case for trying to answer fundamental research questions. So you have a certain question as a researcher, as a scientist, that can be very fundamental in nature. And with fundamental, I mean, it's really curiosity driven. You have a certain question, you're just being curious what the answer could be. You design a certain study using VR, and then VR is your method. You don't study VR itself. You don't use it to change people's behavior in the real world, but you really use it as your method because it offers you certain things that other methods cannot offer you. For instance, it offers you the possibility to study things in the lab in environments, in virtual environments that very much mimic the real world. It very much look like the real world, but still you have more control than you could have in the real world about what's going to happen, what you show people, what they can expect. So you study, in a sense, real world phenomena through a virtual simulation. You sort of recreate, you mimic real life situations in the lab in VR. Right, so this distinction can be made throughout the social sciences, and that's what this paper by Fox, that's already quite old, has done. And they have looked at how often in those three cases, in a large set of research papers in the social sciences, people have used VR in one of those three ways. And this is what they found. So mostly VR is being used as an object or an application in the social sciences by researchers, by scientists, and not so much yet as a method. So this is now about 12 years old, but based on my experience, I think this is more or less still the same. So I don't think those relative differences between the three ways in which VR has been used have changed that much during the last decade. And it's good to keep this in mind. So this is a very broad distinction in the social sciences, but we are going to apply this in the course to the study of language and communication. So how is VR used as an object in the study of language and communication? So for instance, you can think about situations where you would be interacting using language, where you would be communicating with a virtual agent or an avatar. You can study that process in itself. This week, we'll look at applications in the field of language and communication. How is VR there used as an application? You can think of things like public speaking, but also the treatment of language disorders. Also, for instance, foreign language learning. So in all those cases, VR is being used as an application to really hopefully train people in behaviors that hopefully then generalize to their behavior in the real world. So you, for instance, you practice public speaking in VR and you hope that this will improve your public speaking skills in the real world. And finally, in another week, we'll look at VR as a method. How did language researchers, communication researchers use VR as a method to study all sorts of fundamental questions related to language and communication? For instance, what kind of things happen in our brains when we're talking to people in everyday life? This can be studied by putting people in a virtual environment, having them talk, having them communicate, and see what happens in their brains, for instance. So there is really a matter of answering fundamental questions, in this case related to cognition, language and cognition.